The Kyosho Raider was my first ever RC, and I've been looking forward to this build for some time. The Factory Works kit takes the front and rear bulkheads, attaches it to a chassis plate, and creates something that's a lot more akin to the modern buggies that we see today than the vintage Raider. I am getting everything set out and laid out and prepared for this Raider build. We've got our super lovely shocks and our Factory Works parts over here. None of those are standard issue. They're all going to be specific to this particular kit. So just put those to one side for a second. And let's just check that we've got everything else that we need. Front wheel drive shafts, which are important because they spin loose. I've got a couple of gearboxes up here. I've got a brand new one in the bag there. I've got this one that's already got the rear arms and the uprights attached to it. And then this one, because inside there are all the counter gears. You can see the grease on that. And I just stuck a minute ago a couple of these out shafts, or the out drives in there, and checked that everything was spinning free, and it is. I mean, it's got a lot of grease in there. The diff is working as well, so that is ready to go if I wanted to just use that as it sits. But I've got loads of these, and I thought I might as well just use a brand new one. I have got a chassis plate, but I don't think we need it because we're using that Factory Works pack that I showed you a minute ago, so I don't think I need that. I've got the front with lower arms and uprights. Again, I'm not sure we need the bulkhead, but we'll work that out as we get to that point. I've got a very nice looking bumper, well, from that side, and that side there's quite a bit of road rash on it, but we'll use that. The other one I've noticed is cut off here, so I probably don't want to use that, but that one's looking pretty neat. I've got the top upper arms and the kingpins. However, I might use the kingpins, but I might use adjustables on the front and the rear. I've got the shaft sets that are needed there. I've got the plastic parts there, which got a damper stay, not a damper stays, the servo mounts on it. I've got my wheels. I've got some tyres. I've got a box of bits, which has got drive shafts. You saw a minute ago I had the out drives from the differential. I've got drives for the rear wheels. I've got the hexes that are required for mounting the wheels on. I've got another box here full of hardware, screws, various bits and bobs, which I'm sure will come in very useful. I have another bag here which has got a few plastic parts, which you'll see off that plastic tree, but I've only got one servo mount, which is why I bought the others. Oh, sorry, my light's just gone off. And then I've got an entire box of shocks. Oh, perfect. Forgot I had those. More counter gears. So I have got counter gears if I choose to do a complete gearbox build. I think I've got everything. I think. But you know what it's like? You start building something and then realise you don't have everything. So let's get cracking. I've moved everything to one side for a minute because I'm going to take a look at what is inside this packet from Factory Works. I've shown you guys this so many times, and now we're going to slice it open and see what comes inside. Beautifully presented. So we've got all the hardware that we're going to need in there, which is really, really helpful. And a lovely little sticker or two, which is great. And that is all the top plates and hardware that I think we need. I can already see all the carbon fibre shards in there, so I'm going to have to get myself some gloves for handling that lot. But that's a top plate. Uprights. We've got support for the front. Those arms sort of support the front brace. Don't know what that bit's for. And there is the chassis tub. Look at that. Absolutely beautiful. all sort of countersunk as well on the back, which is beauty. Absolutely beautiful. So that is replacing this piece, which is the original Raider tub. Let's just slide that up a little bit. So the first thing I notice is this is slightly wider, but that's probably because of the way the battery's sat. And there's no kick up at the front, so I'm not entirely sure on how that's going to work when we start mounting everything together. That is interesting, because the whole point of a buggy chassis is it has a kick up towards the front, and that is just a flat plate. So I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work, because you do want your buggies to have some sort of kick up at the front. Maybe the secret to that is in the instructions. So where the front bulkhead attaches to the plate is via these back two screws, and then there's a kick up built into this, which must be what that plate's for. That's going to plate on the bottom of there, like that. So we are still going to have the kick up at the front of the buggy, and then those two hockey shape supports back here support onto this front point from there, which gives it some support. Hope my driving's good enough for this. I brought you down for a better view of what's going on here. Rear bulkhead, front bulkhead with kick up. Chassis plate is replacing this piece. So I could have just taken my Raider, unscrewed the front, unscrewed the back, bolted them to the chassis plate, put the steering mechanisms in, and we'd have been off and running. The advantage now of building it from my parts is that I'll be able to run the factory works Raider against the original one and be able to compare them around the track. So, you know, we're going to end up with two Raiders, which is going to be lovely. And this one is going to be quite special. It almost all went horribly wrong because I suddenly realised I didn't have these out on the bench. So these are the steering mechanisms going to the uprights at the front and the back. Sorry, at the front, on the left and the right. And I realised that I hadn't got them out of the box and suddenly panicked. I didn't actually have any because I don't think these are going to be easy to replace. Although maybe they are. The Raider comes with some specific sizes. You can see the bearings that go in the front now, the bushings that are in these originally are really, really small. And it might be better actually to replace those with some more standard Tamiya ones. And if I did so, that might give me some more wheel options. So I'm going to consider that, about whether actually there's a better part to put in the front of here, which gives me a few more options, because you are limited with the way, because of the way these work, you need those out shafts that go into the front and the back, and they kind of sit in there and just spin around in the bearings. Whereas the Tamiya solution is a little bit neater, but we'll have a think about that. But I almost forgot. I was just looking at the front and rear arms and debating whether I should take off the arms while I put it all together. And I've decided I'm going to leave them where they are. So the Raider's arms, quite interesting setup. So you'll notice that there's no C-clips at the front holding the bars in at the front, you see? And there's nothing at the back either. So those arms are held in by these little screws here going through and just holding the bars in place. You've got them there, there, and there. And I'm pretty sure it's the same setup. Yeah, there you go, on the rear as well. Yeah, you see it there. If it would focus in, yeah. So I'm going to leave those arms on for now, rather than taking them off, to make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to get working on putting all this together. These little posts here mount onto the chassis point where the brace goes on the original chassis. So that's where those little hockey sticks are going to come off of. towards the front bulkhead. So I found a solution to those screws by pinching them off the previous Raider, but I'm not overly pleased with that solution. And I think what I want to do is, some people have suggested using a washer with a different type of screw, and I think that's what I will change it to. I'm going to get some big washers and stick those in there instead. Quick bit of multi-tool in. I've taken the outside of the holes off the bulkhead, just a little bit of trim in there. And the reason I've done that is because when I mount the damper stays up here, the adjustable arms have got 3 adjustable points on either side of the damper stay. So if you take off where the arms go on the original Raider, which is in here, from the upright there, it gives you some adjustability straight off the damper stay, which is pretty cool. As I was mounting the rear gearbox, I completely forgot that even on the original Raider, this side of the gearbox mounts to the chassis plate with some nuts on the other side of the screws. Doesn't really look much like a Raider anymore, does it? With that flat, lovely, beautiful carbon flat plate at the bottom. It's all going very, very well so far. I've stuck you back up on the overhead just so we can take a look at what we get inside the Factory Works steering set. So let's open this up. Let's see what we've got inside. We've got a couple of steering arms there. We've got some sort of carbon bar, which probably is for strengthening across the top of where the steering's going to go. We've got some instructions. This is the Ultima kit, but it also works on the Raider as well there. So you can see we're going to stick some of those big screw rods through the centre, bolt all the steering column to it, and then use the bar across the top as a strengthener. It's interesting, it looks like you get a left and a right side for the steering arm at the front. Very straightforward. And we've got some hardware in here, got some nice looking bearings, which is great as well. And we've got all the required hardware and bearings coming out of here. Oops. They are, that's nice. They are flanged as well, which is great. So we've got those, that's going to go through the chassis plate. And we've got some nice top pieces to go on top as well. All looking very, very, very nice. And plenty of little shims and washers in there to make it all nice and tight. So let's get on and get that installed onto the chassis. So I feel like an absolute genius. I've just spent the last half an hour mounting the steering, which now has a bell crank, whatever you want to call it, steering. It feels a bit stiff. I've sprayed some bearing lubrication in there, which hopefully will make that better. But the whole time I've been thinking, how on earth does the servo fit over the top of that? Because normally it's here, you see. And then I realised these holes back here are perfect for the servo. So what's going to happen is the servo is going to mount back here on these holes, and then I'm going to have to create some sort of steering crank from the servo to that will then move this left and right and steer the buggy. But that's a little bit different to how a normal Raider's mounted up. And it took me ages to work it out. I was thinking this was going to sit on top of the mechanism here, but clearly not. It's going to go back here. So the question I've now got to decide is, the motor being this side for weight distribution, I think I'm going to mount servo this side. So how many years old do you think that idler gear is? So I've just been through and just got off as much grime and grease as I can do. I've checked the teeth and they all look absolutely mint. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse that 36 tooth idler gear, probably from the original build back in 1990, all ready to go and be reinstalled. So the diff on the left is the one that's come out of a recent gearbox, and this one is a brand new one. And if you look at the screws on the diff, you can see that this one at the top and the other two are just starting to get rounded off compared to the brand new one. Now I'm going to put this one back in because I still think the diff has got quite a bit of life left in it at the moment. The teeth are looking pretty good around the outside of it. I don't want to waste that. You can see the new one over here. Yeah, the teeth are still pretty good. So I'm going to carry on using this one, but I'm not going to risk trying to open it up because those screws are pretty dodgy. So it is all taking shape. The gearbox is now attached to the rear. All the gears are in and sorted and greased up. I tried the battery, hence we've got some spray of grease because I tested it all out with the lid off and it just shot grease everywhere, which was a little bit silly. Servos mounted, steering arms are on and set. So the next job for me is to put the front and the rear shock towers on, and then mount the plate that goes across the middle, and then we're ready to start building up some linkage arms for the upper and the upper rear and upper front, which will go there and there, and some steering arms in the middle, and then we are getting close to being ready to stick some wheels on and see what it looks like. I shall carry on. This project is the gift that keeps on giving. So this top plate is supposed to go, you can see the problem already. It's supposed to go there and slide underneath. I thought it fit on top at first, but it slides underneath there and then goes either side. But you'll notice my servo is too high. Now I've used the servo stays that come with the kit. If I just slide this around here a little bit so you can see, but they're way too high. So I think I've got to use some shorter servo mounts, or I use the lower holes and cut the tops off. So a little bit more finessing is required. I did double check the instructions and I have used the correct servo posts either side. So I think somewhere in the kit I might have some spares, but I also think I might have used them recently on another project. So I'm going to go through all of the various spare part trees that I've got and see if I've got any shorter servo mounts. So first pair of sprues I pulled out, and boom, I've got a lower servo post. Now what I'm now worried about is that might actually be too short. Maybe not. Maybe that is just the width of my servo, which then will be perfect because that then will sit the servo down on the deck and I'll be able to mount that plate to it. So let's see if that works. And just like that, I have sorted my problems out. So we've got rear damper stay mounted, front damper stay mounted, top plate mounted, servo lowered, steering crank in place, ready for steering rods. We've got adjustable arms that are needed next on the front and the rear. Got to mount the shocks, build the shocks and mount the shocks. And we are then cooking with gas on the Raider Factory Works Edition. I think it looks pretty spectacular. To think that's just the front and rear bulkhead of the Raider bolted together with an FTP chassis plate. I thought it was carbon, but I don't think it is. Now I've handled it a bit more, it doesn't feel like carbon, actually. I think I was mistaken when I first started working on it. It feels like reinforced plastic, which is great. Still super strong, still going to do the job. It looks great. It's so light, even with the motor back there now. It is super, super light. I'm going to mount the electronics on this side. So probably put the receiver and the ESC over here somewhere. The battery is going to go under here. I haven't quite worked out how to mount the battery yet. That's the only thing it hasn't given me any instructions on how to do. And I don't see any battery mounting things. So I'm going to have to get creative in terms of how I'm going to make sure my batteries don't fall out. Answers on a postcard on that one. I don't necessarily think that's been thought out. However, I have noticed there's these groovy little indents here. So I wonder whether you can build some sort of battery strap process up the top there. I do have some Kyosho battery straps from back in the day. I do wonder whether there's a clever way that I can mount these. No, it's not going to really work, is it? Mount those on the top of there somehow to do the battery, or saddle it under and mount it on the top. So these just sort of go through, wrong way. They go through that way, and then they re-grip round on themselves. So theoretically, you could mount the battery up high, up there like that, but they might just pop off while running, and the battery's moving left and right. So I've got to think of a battery solution. Answers on a postcard if you've got any ideas. Right, that is the next part of the Raider build. I'm going to have a little break now. Going to have a nice cup of coffee and congratulate myself on a first part of this. Job well done. We're getting into the more practical issues now, though, the practicality pieces. And that's where things are going to start going wrong, because they always do.